We got someone in the back too.
Arkamızdaki kapının oradan İsrail askerleri bana ateş ederek geldi.
From there, the door behind us, a soldier came towards me whilst opening fire.
Ateş ederek.
Tutun
Dizlerinin üstüne
Then they
çökerttiler.
kicked me to get me to lie face down.
Şurada dizlerinin üstüne
They bound my
çöktü.
wrist with plastic handcuffs. My jaw was broken, the flesh was torn, and the bone was slipping from here. And I was fixing it with my hands so it wouldn't fall on the floor.
Elini düzeltiyordum ondan öncesine kadar, yere düşmeyene kadar.
34-year-old Murat Tashkin is a father of 3. He was left for dead as Israeli soldiers opened fire on board the Mavi Marmara. It was one of 6 aid ships heading for Gaza when the attack began in the early hours of the 31st of May, 2010.
Tabancasını çekerek oradaki arkadaşın.
The soldier pulled out his gun and fired into my friend's head.
9 passengers were killed on board the Mavi Marmara. The attack on the Freedom Flotilla shook the world, but in the rush to pass judgment over the mission's intentions, much of the international media failed to investigate the real story behind the flotilla and the people on board. We'll speak directly to those who witnessed the events firsthand, and I'll retrace my steps on that fateful morning. Istanbul is welcoming home the Mavi Marmara. For these people and millions around the world, the ship has become a symbol of resistance against oppression. But the Israeli government claims it posed a very real threat to Israel's national security. The story is one that's been told from many different angles, but most of the narrators have never even set foot on board the ship. Unlike many other Western-based journalists who've claimed neutrality on the issue but whose coverage has been, in my opinion, subjective, I'm ready at the outset to declare my interests. For me, like the other passengers, the ship was a home. I witnessed the attack firsthand and was one of the journalists broadcasting live from the deck as the Israeli soldiers were opening fire above. I knew 2 of the dead. I'd already provided extensive coverage of previous efforts to break the siege of Gaza. The small territory is home to 1.7 million Palestinians, but Israel tightly restricts who and what can get in or out and maintains a land, air and sea blockade. The United Nations has described the blockade as collective punishment and illegal, but Israel disputes this and describes the restrictions as a necessary security measure. Organisers of the Freedom Flotilla wanted to open a direct route to Palestine.
The only way to go to Gaza without any affiliation between the Egyptians and Israel, the sea. All the laws say that this siege is illegal and Israel don't have any right to make a siege around to Gaza. It is illegal. United Nations said like this, and all international bodies request from Israel to end the siege. But only verbally they are saying, physically they are not doing something, unfortunately.
The previous voyages by sea to Gaza had all been small scale, but 5 out of 8 were successful. This time, cargo ships carrying thousands of tons of aid were prepared with medical supplies, construction material and power generators, along with clothing and toys. The IHH was one of several charities supporting the effort.
Huge generators for hospitals in Gaza because the
fuel supply, makes the power supply intermittent. Huge water tanks, the massive amount of basic equipment, construction materials that I could see going onto the ships made our aid from the UK look tiny.
But it was clear from the outset that transporting humanitarian supplies was not the flotilla's sole objective.
On the boat and before the boat, we have openly announced the world. We have a two mission. The first, bring humanitarian relief to Gazan peoples. The second, to announce and to publicize these siege problems and to end the siege on that region. These two was all right, and we don't believe that requesting ending the siege is a political issue. It is also a humanitarian issue. Because of this siege, peoples are suffering.
The Mavi Marmara, a Turkish vessel under the IHH's leadership, was the flagship of the fleet. With 600 passengers on board, it carried representatives from communities around the world that had donated money towards the aid loaded onto the Turkish ships. They were joined by parliamentarians and academics, but there were also Palestinians who had no other way of visiting their homeland.
I'm happy to be going to Gaza so that I can take my children into my heart, and through them all Palestinians in occupied land. Jews as people are our brothers. We all believe in one God. We are against Zionism, but we're not against Jews or Judaism.
The elderly archbishop was joined by another senior Palestinian, 81-year-old Haji Ismail Nashwan.
The non-Muslim people here have come with the humanity in their heart. Everyone with some feeling in their heart has to help.
But one of the passengers was so young, he was oblivious to the storm brewing around him. Alongside passengers from nearly 40 nations, there were also dozens of news teams preparing for the journey. But there was a marked absence of any major Western media outlets.
It was really amazing and surprising that you had 40 international media from all over the world, even from Latin America, and you didn't have that from Europe or even from the United States. Those big media, BBC, CNN, French television, Spanish television, they weren't there. But the worst thing is not just that they weren't there. The worst thing is that they weren't covering the story. They knew it could be a huge story. It was already a huge story.
This ship has become an international village floating on the Mediterranean Sea, and now it's flanked on either side by its sister ships. As Press TV's correspondent on board the flotilla, I was to file reports and provide live coverage of the journey. The IHH's technical team had set up a satellite broadcasting system on board the Mavi Marmara to facilitate media reporting.
Mavi Marmara ve diğer yardım gemilerinin yola çıkmasındaki en büyük amaçlardan
One of the main reasons the flotilla set off was to lift the embargo, as well as taking aid to the people. So we wanted to show people the journey and how it is not easy to reach Gaza, and if there was any incident we wanted the world to see. In this context, the satellite broadcasting system was really one of the most important systems on the ship, nearly as important as the ship's engine. It was our way to communicate with the world.
Bizim açımızdan baktığında dünyayla haberleşmek adına.
But all was not well. Israel was warning in the strongest possible terms that a breach of its blockade would not be tolerated.
We really have all determination and political will to prevent this provocation against us. And we hope that the international community will understand us, and I think that we're ready at any cost, as I mentioned, to prevent this provocation.
They said it's a security reason. What is the security reason? They claim us, you are carrying something against us in your cargo. We request from the media, for all international bodies, from United Nations and for all countries. We are ready to give a permissions for a commission to check what we have on the boats. And also we announce All these materials have passed from the Turkish customs. Why? X-ray machines.
But Tel Aviv demanded the flotilla hand over its aid to Israeli authorities. It pledged to deliver the aid to Gaza after removing any banned items. But many of the items on the ships, such as the thousands of tons of cement or the boxes of plastic toys, were prohibited.
Unfortunately, these people have rejected our proposal to transfer the humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip.
And with reports in the Israeli media that the military was being dispatched to intercept the flotilla, the mood on board was defiant.
We assure to you that we don't have any weapon, we don't have anything that, can cause harm to them. But if they force us, maybe we have to defend with our bodies to defend the ship, inshallah.
We have an absolute right in law to proceed direct to Gaza. We're equipped to do it, and we see no reason not to carry straight on with it. It does seem to me that Israel's behaving more and more like a psychotic patient, in that they're perhaps making what they see as a reasonable offer in a world of their own imagining. It's not the world that we all live in.
I saw it as threats, to be honest with you. I remember all the way through the flotilla thinking that they won't attack us. They may try and block us, they may try and barge us, but they won't attack us. They won't board the ship because of the media that was on board. And obviously the world's press would know, and it would look bad for them.
The Israelis could have chosen many different scenarios. Maybe they could have chosen the path of letting go the flotilla arrive to Gaza and show the world that, well, look, this is humanitarian aid, we can let them go. We still are fighting against Palestine, but we let these people go. So we don't have all this bad press in the world. But of course, if you see their history, they don't care so much about what the world thinks about them.
The Mavi Marmara has been anchored at sea for 3 days, awaiting the arrival of the other vessels in the flotilla.
The atmosphere on board the ship was one of huge optimism that we were going to make it to Gaza. Alongside the images of Israel's preparations on their coast, Gaza had prepared for us to arrive. They'd had to work to make the port more accessible to ships of this size.
At around 4 p.m, the 6 ships of the Freedom Flotilla begin their journey to Gaza from their meeting point south of Cyprus in the Mediterranean Sea. IHH leader Bülent Yildirim, aware of the Israeli threats, issues a warning to the Israeli military against attacking the ship. The ships continue on their path south, and within a few hours at around 10 p.m, the first signs of Israeli contact.
We can visually see one significantly large Israeli warship, and there are 3 altogether on radar. I'm not sure whether this is an attempt to scare the convoy volunteers or whether this is a serious threat at this stage. But
tensions rise on board the Mavi Marmara, and passengers don life jackets in fear of being thrown overboard by an attacking force.
A lot of people became worried. People didn't really know what was going to happen.
The Israelis have rammed a Free Gaza boat in the past and made a big hole in the side of it, so that was a concern.
Then a warning.
Mavi Marmara, you are approaching an area of hostilities, which is under a naval blockade. The Gaza area, coastal region, and Gaza harbor are closed to all maritime traffic. The Israeli government supports delivery of humanitarian supplies to the civilian population in the Gaza Strip and invites you to enter the Ashdod port.
Negative. Our destination is Gaza.
But with the flotilla remaining in international waters, the organizers are hopeful that Israel will not attack.
Israeli Navy, this is the Freedom Flotilla. We are comprised of 6 motor vessels carrying only passengers and humanitarian aid destined for the Gaza Strip. We do not carry anything that constitutes a threat to your armed forces. Therefore, you are not justified in using any force against us. The blockade of Gaza is illegal under international law. We have permission from the Gaza port authorities to enter.
Several hours on and lights have been spotted in the sky above the Mavi Marmara. The flotilla's 6 vessels have come closer together for safety, and volunteers keep watch for any further signs of the Israeli military. Some, fearing a military assault, have removed tools from the ship's workshop and sawn off metal bars for use in defending the ship.
It was the only form of self-defence we had on board, was to hold a railing, and if somebody came towards you with a gun, perhaps you would have been able to protect yourself. It didn't seem very hopeful in the circumstances.
Just after 4 a.m, the Muslim passengers on board the ship begin the morning prayer.
In the most peaceful moments in our days. In this time, they wanted to attack us.
It was as though they were going to war, and they were all armed with several weapons. You could see them, on their backs, on the front, in the holsters. And as soon as they approached the ships, they began to fire without any warning. They were then throwing sound grenades, flash grenades, tear gas was landing.
The whole stern of the ship just erupted in fire and smoke and flame and bullets and tear gas.
A number of people started throwing whatever they could grab hold of, so whether it were bottles, whether it was a table, chairs, whatever were on the side of the ship, just trying to repel them, just to try and keep them off the ship, and obviously to try and push them back.
Failing to board the ship from sea level, the Israeli military sends in helicopters laden with soldiers. Volunteers on the ship, having already been attacked from below, fiercely resist the second wave of soldiers now coming down from above.
We start wrestling with them, trying to stop them from coming.
Ahsan Shamrook, a British Palestinian, felt it was his duty to join in the fight to defend the ship.
The time I was here, I felt it's home. We 45 nations. We were really united, real good family.
Ahsan says he was shot in the back of the head from a helicopter while he was struggling with a soldier. The bullet passed through his face. His friends consider his survival a miracle.
3 or 4 soldiers, commando soldiers, they jumped me, they put me on the floor and they tied me back. When I was on the floor, they start kicking me. Remember, I speak Hebrew very well. And I heard one of the soldiers saying, "He's the leader, kill him."
The roof of the ship is home to the satellite broadcasting system, which is beaming out images of the attack to the world. In protecting it, the men on the top level believe they're saving lives.
Hal böyleyken bizim her şeyi olanca çıplaklığıyla göstermemiz gerekiyordu ve
we needed to show everything the way it was, plainly. If we couldn't show what was happening, Israel would have been free to do what it liked, and probably many more people wouldn't be alive today. If we couldn't broadcast the live footage to the world's television networks, then we wouldn't have been able to explain the incident to anyone. Israel would have shown the incident in a completely different way, and all of us would have been labeled as terrorists.
In the chaos, I witnessed 2 Israeli soldiers being dropped down from the roof onto the deck and film as passengers disarmed them.
When I saw the Israeli on the ground, we got to him. I saw his weapon and immediately went to try and get the weapon off of him. It was a 9mm pistol. The whole objective was to disarm him. That was it, to disarm him. By that point, I had already seen 1 dead body. They were not there simply to subdue us. They were prepared to kill. So I was successful in getting that pistol. I took it into my possession and I ejected the bullets. They were live rounds. These were not rubber-coated bullets. These were regular lead bullets.
In total, 3 Israeli soldiers are captured, disarmed and taken inside the ship. Israel claims the passengers wanted to kill them.
These terrorists used knives, they used clubs, they used metal rods. They had only one goal: to kill and lynch IDF soldiers.
But the soldiers aren't lynched. Instead, they're given medical treatment and later released.
If they wanted to kill those soldiers, they wouldn't have left the outer deck alive. But the aid workers protected the soldiers, disarmed them, neutralized them, and took them downstairs for their own protection.
You need to understand this view. The people's on the floor, you have seen yourself, everywhere is blood. You don't understand what's happening and you don't have any capacity. And many peoples have been killed. And on this view, 3 soldiers are coming who are the killers of our brothers. We don't allow anyone to do something against them. And after these things, we have treated them, or doctors give a time for them, we release for the outside.
The IHH claims a number of people, including a doctor, are shot while escorting the soldiers to freedom. Meanwhile, me and other journalists, unaware of whether or not the satellite uplink is still working, try to alert our channels and the world to what's taking place. All other communications have been jammed by the Israelis.
We're being attacked from every single side. This is in international waters.
Soon after this broadcast, I watch as Cevdet Kılıçlar, a photographer, is pronounced dead. He's been shot in the center of the forehead.
He was using a camera. He had the most dangerous weapon for Israel, which is that photographic evidence of their crimes.
Tens of people have been injured, 2 people have been killed.
When we tried to go upstairs and the helicopters were still there and they're hovering directly above us, I seen them firing out.
Israel denies this and claims its soldiers only fired in self-defense on the deck. But the laser sights from the helicopters searching for a target can be clearly seen. Me and several others witnessed the raising of a makeshift white flag in full view of the helicopters and the soldiers who now controlled the roof. But the sound of heavy gunfire continues to envelop the ship.
They were shooting people in the doorways, people with chains and broom handles. They're picking them off in the doorway. They'd drop, they'd be pulled out of the way, then somebody else would step up and take their place.
Some of the injured are still trapped on the roof.
They left me for 2 hours on the floor bleeding. One Turkish brother, I think his name is Murad, he had 5 bullets in his shoulder. He had 1 bullet in his leg, and the police hit him on his jaw. They broke his jaw.
After they tied my hands, an Israeli soldier came close and asked, Arab or English? I was lying on the floor over here. I replied, I'm a Turk. A soldier who was standing on my left began to kick me repeatedly in the face, and my nose was broken into pieces, and I was partially blinded in my left eye. There was also a friend on his knees. There was blood gushing out of his back. He was screaming, I'm finished, I'm done. One of the soldiers that was by me told him to shut up, but he didn't understand. Then the soldier pulled out his gun and fired into his head.
Israel denies that its soldiers carried out executions, but one camera captures what appears to be the killing of a wounded passenger lying on the floor. The order is given to everyone on the decks to retreat inside, and as we make our way down the stairs, the full scale of the violence becomes apparent. There are 4 bodies on the floor of my cabin. Next door, doctors are desperately trying to save the lives of passengers who've been seriously injured, but they don't have the right equipment.
I had to walk through the second deck lobby, or the medical deck, and it was full of bodies. It was, I stopped and looked and took pictures. There was 3 people being given CPR at the same time. There was a gentleman propped up against the wall, and I guess they just left him to die. He had a big hole in his chest, and I guess they just decided to save someone else. He's beyond being saved. So I took his picture, and he died in front of my eyes.
Israeli soldiers are now in full control of the ship, but desperate pleas over the radio and PA system in English and Hebrew for medical help are ignored. It's 2 hours before medical evacuations begin. By the end of Israeli operations, 9 passengers are dead and at least 54 injured. The Israeli military has fired at least 650 rounds of ammunition, around half of them live bullets. A United Nations international fact-finding mission describes the actions of the Israeli soldiers as demonstrating levels of totally unnecessary and incredible violence, and perpetrating an unacceptable level of brutality, which constitute grave violations of human rights law and international humanitarian law. Israel's own investigation exonerates its soldiers and states that they acted lawfully in self-defense within the boundaries of international humanitarian law.
Blockade of Gaza is legal. It shows that the enforcement of the blockade last May was legal. And it shows that the Israeli soldiers who boarded the Marmara acted legally and in self-defense.
This is all I have. This is it. My blood, these bloody clothes, that's all I have. Israel has taken everything else.
It denies that any executions or human rights abuses took place, and denies the numerous allegations from injured passengers that they were abused in custody.
The organizers are well known for their ties to global jihad, Al-Qaeda and Hamas.
In part 2, I'll examine Israel's attempt to dominate the media coverage of what took place. I'll look at the forensic evidence largely ignored by the Western mainstream media, and I'll ask the IHH what it makes of Israeli claims that it supports terrorism.